We all have heard the term show, don't tell. Every parent, every student, and every teacher will give this advice to students, whether they're going for the NAPLAN test, selective test, HAS test, scholarship exam, or even the HSC in Year 12. Show us that she is a spoiled brat. Don't tell us. Show us that he lives in a run-down apartment building. Don't tell us. While it certainly is great advice, parents and teachers often fail to really explain what it means. So students know that they have to do that, but they don't specifically know the steps they need to try to show and not tell. I'll be breaking this down and more. Let's get into it. Telling is when the author or writer summarizes or uses exposition to simply tell the reader what is happening. Showing, on the other hand, is about using description and action to help the reader experience the story. As you might have guessed, showing and telling can be only used in creative writing like narratives and fables. The main reason why we want to do showing and not telling is because people who are reading creative writing are not looking to just get pure information and facts. They read to be entertained and to immerse themselves into a story. Imagine if you wanted to watch a movie, not a documentary. You are sitting in the cinema, waiting for the movie to start, but the person next to you tells you all the interesting parts and spoils it for you. That wouldn't feel good, right? You do not want to be told what the movie is, and you want to watch it yourself and find out yourself. The same applies to readings. They want to experience the story for themselves and share the struggles with the characters, and that can only be effectively achieved through showing and not telling. So now you know the difference between telling and showing. It can still be quite difficult to recognize when you are telling. Here are some red flags or some telltale signs to help you differentiate and identify that. To spot telling, read every sentence carefully. Personally, this is something that I'm still trying to work on myself, but if you do manage to even have a blend between showing and telling, I think ultimately you'll take your writing to the next level and you'll get a much better mark as opposed to telling throughout the entire story. There are probably around 10 or so red flags which indicate that you are probably telling and not showing, but in this video, I'll be just going through the three main ones that students in primary school and high school keep making consistent. The first one is centered on conclusions. If you provide conclusions to readers, you, in most cases, are telling. Not conclusion at the end of a story, but for a situation or a feeling. To show, you have to provide them with enough evidence so that they can come to the conclusions themselves. The example of telling here is, it was so obvious that it was trying to start a fight. As you can see, this is a conclusion. Think about how you could show readers what it was that made it obvious that he was trying to start a fight. So the example of showing, what did he just say? Snarling, he stepped forward, right into John's personal space. Showing gives us a description of action, body language, facial expression, and dialogue so that we can conclude that he's trying to pick a fight without the author telling us that he's trying to pick a fight. Number two, backstory. If you report things that happened in the past before this very moment, you are telling. For important scenes, show your reader what is happening as it's happening in real time instead of summing it up what happened a couple minutes ago. A good indicator for when you might be reporting things that happened in the past is if you're finding yourself right in past perfect form. If you're writing in this form, see if you can rewrite it or rephrase it to show the scene in just normal past tense form. Example of telling, I tested the car to see if it would start. It didn't. Example of showing, I turned the key in the ignition. A click, click, click noise drifted up from the engine. I smashed my fist into the steering wheel. Damn it. If you find yourself using an adverb, you are usually telling. Whenever possible, reduce the number of adverbs you use. Sometimes the sentence is fine without it. Other times, you might want to rephrase or rewrite the sentence to replace the weaker verb or adverb combination with a stronger verb that makes the adverb unnecessary. Of course, don't just cut all the adverbs out in your writing, but use them sparingly. I love my adverbs. but there's always a time and place for them, especially in creative writing. Example of telling. The dog tucked its tail between its legs and whined anxiously. Example of showing. The dog tucked its tail between its legs and whined. The posture of the dog and the sound it makes shows their anxiety anyway, so there's no need to include the adverb anxiously. An example of telling. Don't lie to me, he shouted angrily. Example of showing. Don't lie to me, damn it! He slammed his palm on the table. His word choice and his action shows the anger without stating the emotion, angrily. Example of telling. Lisa slowly walked down the street. Example of showing. Lisa strolled down the street. The adverb slowly tells the reader how Lisa walked. The word strolled shows it. Remember that the points above is not a complete list, but rather ones that I believe are the more common signs that you can self-diagnose and correct to tell if you're telling or showing. Some tips on top of that could include, remember that adverbs typically end in ly, so any word that has the suffix ly is an indicator that it could be an adverb. See whether you can replace this or not use it instead, or use it sparingly. Number 2, when you're first starting out, don't try to be perfect. It is much better to just give it a go and just go back and correct it. You don't want to test it out and try it in a very important exam such as the selective test without any practice or second chances, because chances are you're going to do a mixture of telling or showing that you might not even finish your story at all. Instead, do a writing task at home and go through line by line to point out any of the red flags that you've noticed that I have mentioned. Can you picture everything you have described? Or have you told us through a backstory or conclusion? This is when you can rephrase and dissect it accordingly. On my second go writing, I can nearly always find ways to improve on mistakes and find mistakes that I've made so you are not alone. The students that I personally teach also do this as well. But if you do not go over this again, how can you improve and make sure that you are showing rather than telling? It's hard. This is great, but how do we turn telling into showing? And there are 3 main tips so that you know how to show instead. The first one is to use the 5 senses. Showing means letting your readers experience your story world along with the points of view of the character. Try to engage with the reader's senses, not just smell, sight, or taste. In every scene, put yourself in the point of view of the character's shoes and describe what he or she can see, hear, smell, taste, and sense. An example of showing, I stuck my nose out of the car's open window and breathed in the fresh pine scent. The cold made my cheeks burn and my eyes tear. Number 2, use strong and dynamic verbs. Make your writing come to life by using strong active verbs, not verbs that are weak and static. For example, instead of saying she walked, use she strutted, she strode, she trudged, or she tiptoed to show exactly how she moves. Keep on the lookout for weak verbs, usually in all forms of to be, including the overused there was and there were, and to have and replace them with verbs that paint a clearer picture in the reader's mind. An example of telling, the man was thin and wore a coat that was too big for him. Example of showing, his coats hung around his frame. Verbs that can also weaken your writing are started to and began as well. We can see this in the example. For a weak verb, the man started to shake. Without the weak verb, the man shook. Or maybe even fine tremors rushed through the man's body. Be careful not to overdo it though. At times, you just want your characters to walk across a room without drawing attention to it, instead of strutting, trudging, or tiptoeing. If the action is important, use a weaker verb, and that is fine. Otherwise, you're going to paint a picture and the entire story will not have enough time to write a plot or follow the plot formula, as you're just showing everything in the room and nothing really happens. Showing me what the room looks like, but you haven't talked about the actions at all. But if you want to build suspense and tension, use the stronger verbs to show what the character is feeling while they are walking. And number 3, you can use concrete nouns. Try to be as specific as possible rather than use generic terms. That's not just true for verbs, but for nouns too. Use concrete nouns that create the image you want in readers' minds. Instead of having your characters eat breakfast, let your readers know that they're having eggs and bacon. Instead of telling readers that your protagonist has a dog, show them a drooling husky. Example of telling, Aditya lived in a big house. Example of showing, Aditya's steps echoed across the foyer as he entered the mansion. In conclusion, showing is an advice that is given by teachers, parents, and tutors alike. What frustrates me though is that they do not give specific examples for students to actually know how to use it themselves. I've gone through a portion of the theory, but if you wanted me to go over even more examples or even more red flags to look out for, just let me know down in the comments below. I can make a part 2 of this video. If you like this video, definitely click like in this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and just let me know what other topics you like. If you like Selective, let me know. If you want more videos on scholarship, let me know. Although the elements in this video, I think, is a great start for students who are just looking to elevate their creative writing game, there's always more things to go into. Thank you guys so much, and I always appreciate your support.